What's going on, guys? Josh from Strengthside. This is episode 9 of the Strengthside podcast. This is going to be the last episode of season 1 of the podcast. This has been experimental, just putting it out on YouTube. Just kind of wanted to have a platform to talk about some of this stuff that I wanted to talk about, and it's been a lot of fun. But I'm going to take a little break away from it for a bit. And I'd love to hear from you guys. Comment below if you enjoyed this podcast series. Let me know why you enjoyed it. And that will fuel me in when and how I'm going to bring back season 2 of the podcast. And with this being the last episode, this is going to be the deepest episode. This is going to be the most vulnerable that I get on here. And I'm going to tell you about the journey of Strengthside, but really just the journey within myself that I've been on. So, years back when I started Strengthside, the YouTube channel, it was a purely ego-driven pursuit. And now I can really look back on this and fully see it and understand it, that I was in a place of wanting to teach people because that made me feel like I was an expert or, I was a professional. But I think this came from a really fearful place. I was scared that I wasn't a good trainer. I was scared that I didn't know as much as I thought that I knew. I was scared that I wasn't a very good athlete. So I thought that if I built up a presence online and if I was teaching people, then it would prove that I was what I thought that I was. Or really, I was what I was pretending to be. During this time, when I look back on it, I was pretty depressed. I was uneasy with myself. I had the general kind of angst and a general anxiety, just living in the world. During this time, I was very rigid, very stiff in my body and in my mind. I drank heavily on the weekends to deal with, the feelings of feeling stressed and feeling anxious and feeling inadequate, really. And I'd go through these cycles of working really hard and pushing my body, pounding the weights, doing all the things that I thought made me feel manly, made me feel like somebody. And then I'd go through the weekends and totally reverse everything and drink a lot and eat a lot. And I can say that I've blacked out more times than I'd like to admit. And I was just in a very, very unhealthy way of life when I think about it. At the time, it didn't seem so bad to me. I was exercising. I was trying to eat well during the week. But all in all, it was a very unhealthy way of living. I remember so many highs and lows during that time. And I was able to keep a smile on my face. But on the inside was a lot of anxiety, a lot of guilt, and, I think keeping a smile on my face was part of what made it all worse, was that I was pretending to be happy and I wasn't able to share some of the struggles that I was going through. Now, the good thing I had going for me is I never had a problem with being different. I never had a problem with being a little weird. And around this time, I started to kind of understand that maybe I was pursuing a direction that wasn't what I really wanted to pursue and how I really wanted to live. So around this time, I started reading some books. I started reading some spiritual books, some philosophy. Two authors that come to mind are Alan Watts and Osho, or rather, speakers, I guess you could say. I traveled for the first time out of my country. I had a few experiences on psychedelic drugs, mushrooms, MDMA. I guess is not a psychedelic, but went to some music festivals. And all of this slowly, and mind you, slowly, this wasn't like a overnight thing, but it all started to shift my perspective a bit. And what started to change was my values and kind of what I cared about. A lot of this was driven by my physical practice, which kind of takes us back to strength side, right? Because, a lot of this is I have found is very, very tied to how I treat my body and what I value for my body. And I started chasing more of a feeling state rather than just the external goals. So instead of wanting to deadlift 50 more pounds, I started thinking about how do I want my hips and my spine to feel in everyday life? What do I want my body to be able to do? How can I contribute to my body feeling more free? And what this really led to was a big tapering off of my ego. And I'm not saying that I got rid of my ego, because my ego is still very there. It's still very strong. But instead of wanting to be the strongest or the most knowledgeable, I just started to want to be like the most me that I could be. And I wanted to really just go after all the things that would make me feel really, really good. And eventually I found through Strength Side, because I had already started something and I already had a growing audience, that I wanted to start sharing this with people. I wanted to start sharing a bit of my journey and a bit of the things that were helping me go from a place of scarcity and go from a place of stress and anxiety to, a little bit more on the other side of that coin, right? And I've found sharing to be just a really significantly effective way to feel better in life. I started sharing on Strength Side more, some of my journey, and in my personal life, I started opening up and sharing more of what I was going through. When I think back to that time when I was depressed and everything was driven by the ego, one of the main things that stands out is that I felt really alone. I felt really lonely, and not for lacking people around me. I had friends and family around me, but I think the difference is that I wasn't expressing anything that I was going through. And I mean expressing in the form of words in conversation with people, but also expressing through being creative, right? Any creative pursuit, right? And especially creativity through being physical, I didn't have these outlets in my life to share and to express how I was feeling, and that is just a recipe for disaster if you're keeping everything bottled up. You need to be able to talk to people, and you need to be able to have a non-verbal way of communicating what's inside you. So what really helped me was developing deeper relationships to my friends and my loved ones, being able to kind of create that trust and to talk about some of the deeper aspects of life, the struggles and the hardships that we're going through. And then also, of course, like I mentioned earlier, as my physical practice started to completely change, I started being able to express my movement in different ways by crawling around on the ground, by dancing. I started doing capoeira, which, all these things were just massive accelerators of growth, because it was things that I wasn't completely comfortable with. But as I grew more comfortable, this made me more comfortable with myself, and it made me more grounded, and it gave me that outlet to kind of express things that are going on in me that are at more of a subconscious level. And the other thing that I would say really contributed in this physical way is taking more pride in how I was doing something, right? So really, really diving into the small details, not going through the motions of an activity or an exercise, but really taking that that craftsman approach and trying to kind of fine tune everything that I was doing. And this, what this brought with it was more fulfillment, more joy, and of course, just more connection to what you're doing and to the outside world as well. My coach uses the phrase, "the thing is bigger than the thing." And essentially that's what I'm describing right now, is how, the practice that you develop through your body can really fuel your growth through life. And I hope that I was able to kind of express how those two things were really in parallel here, right? Because I started thinking about kind of the journey of Strength Side, and how essentially, it's been the journey of me, the journey of Josh Hash, and both of those things have grown together. And both my physical practice and where I'm at mentally and spiritually have all kind of just progressed along the same line. So if I could offer any advice to anyone out there who's feeling in the state that I described as I was years ago, I would say to talk to someone, to open up to a loved one. Chances are they're going to be able to relate to you on some level. And it's going to feel really good to get some of that out. The other thing I'd recommend is, if you're here, if you're watching my stuff, then you're obviously into fitness. Do something different. If you have lifted weights most of your life, if you have done strength training type of stuff most of your life, then do a dance class, sign up for a yoga class. If you play sports, if you played basketball most of your life, go take a martial arts class, right? Do something a little bit different, and try to use what you do in movement as a way to also connect with people. I think there's so much power in just having a community around you of people doing the same type of thing. This is what a lot of martial arts can bring, dance classes can bring, people just coming together, like-minded folk, and doing the same activity. It's a beautiful thing, man. So, just to bring this full circle, as I said, when I started Strength Side, it was purely ego-driven. It was purely to show how much I know. And now, where I'm at with Strength Side is, hey guys, I just want to share my journey. I want to share some of the things that have helped me. And if you relate to that, if you can learn from that, then I'm really happy about that. And if you can't, then it's all good. No worries. As I mentioned, I have a coach. I've had a coach for at least the last 4 to 5 years. I think it's extremely important to have someone with an objective view who can guide you along in whatever you're trying to pursue. And of course, I coach people as well. If you relate to this and you are interested in my style of training, then hit me up. It's a big commitment, both in time and money, but it's a pretty rewarding commitment as well. Shoot me an email if you're interested, guys. That's the podcast. I don't even really have much left to say. You could like or subscribe or do all that BS. I appreciate your time, and as always,